Hello, Isaac.
Morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm excited to have our third day in a row to try to get to the Micah
Okay.
prophecy fulfillment. Today's a magical day as we're starting with it.
Today's what?
Today's a magical day that we get
A
to
magical day.
prophecy.
I think every day's been magical so far. We've touched upon some important concepts yesterday. The concept of Messiah and kingship. And I was thinking about this earlier today, and I've noticed that I want to highlight a couple things. So we've noticed that Matthew tends to be subversive, and there appears to be a common theme. There appears to be a common theme with the subversiveness. I think, the first instance of this was the example of Joseph. He calls him Joseph to be a righteous man, but then he doesn't make him antinomianistic. He didn't want, like, here's this instance of where a person he had to obey the law, but he didn't want to do it in that way. So it probably was subversive in our definition of what righteousness meant, given that this book was written after the life of Jesus, after, like, when they had some understanding of how things were. That's the first instance. And the second one here, as in, um, when the Magi, when they called him the King of the Jews, is he saying that the truth claims about God are not limited to Judaism, in the
Well,
sense that,
it's tough to, I know you tried to make the universalistic point earlier, and it's tough because they're still saying that this is how the king of the Jews should be. And it looks like Herod takes that seriously too. So we talked about if it's possible that they're telling it from their Zoroastrian or from their own personal perspective, but it doesn't seem to be that case. It's hard to understand the interfaith relationship that is going on and
Mhm.
what is taking place at all.
I think so. Isn't the main point in this? This is the author. This is Matthew. The author of Matthew. His perspective of how things played out, right? So we don't even so we don't know exactly what this magi said, what actually transpired. This is what the author wants us to know. And so my question, I mean, so, maybe he's embellished a few things, and the purpose of this is to say, you know what, historically this is what they believed, but
No,
now
and I agree. When we look at the Messiah, a lot of times we do think of King of the Jews. But if you want to think of this ubiquitous or universalist Messiah, maybe it does make sense that like other religions even recognize it. You could definitely make that point.
anyway, and so then this leads us to the third topic of Messiah and Son. So you asked me yesterday, was he predefined, was he predestined, or was it deterministic for him to be the Messiah and thing?
Right.
And so I did think about that, and so here's how I'm at least here's how I'm thinking about it. If I were to argue from analogy, right? You're born a Jew. So Rush Schultz was born a Jew, and then, like, you cannot unjew, like, that's just who you are. Now, once you're born a Jew, you can choose how you live your life. You can choose to be a reformed Jew,
Right. So you're differentiating between identity versus executing of actions. Right.
correct.
So
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 I think,
again, it comes down to if you think the Messiah needs to accomplish anything during his
and
or
he will.
her
And
lifetime to become
and
Messiah.
and so he will, right? So Jesus was brought as a Messiah and a King, but in terms of what he does as a Messiah and King, it's subversive again. He turns the definition on its head.
Again, it's interesting. Like I love the word subversive, and we keep using it,
Yeah.
but we definitely have to be sensitive to the fact that the Matthean community would it wasn't necessarily trying to be subversive. The Matthean community maybe wants a couple boxes checked, but this is something that we could keep our eyes on
Okay.
as we move
So
forward. So today we're going to read two verses, not one, in excitement. We're going to read 2, 5, and 6. So go for it.
the Gospel according to Saint Matthew, chapter 2, verses 5 and 6, verses 5 onwards. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who shall shepherd my people Israel."
Right. So first of all, I know you mentioned that like there seems to be a lot of Isaiah quotes, and I mentioned Micah is a contemporary of Isaiah, and I love that they're quoting Micah. First of all, Micah is not very well quoted, but number two, Micah is very much like if you're going to choose a prophet who has a New Testament message, namely destruction of Jerusalem for capitalistic reasons.
Mhm.
Namely, he prophesies that there's going to be an era of universal peace, which should be centered somewhere in Jerusalem. It definitely seems to be one of the messages of Christianity in general.
Mhm.
He imagines that there will be glory coming back to Zion or to Jewish people, and all the non-Jews of the world will also abandon idolatry. So this is actually one of the very famous kind of messianic visions, namely that someone who doesn't only have a vision for the Jewish people, but also at least has a plan of what the non-Jews will do as well. So I think Micah is one of the better people to cite.
Would you also say that Micah prophesied what the ethics of this new Messiah would be? Because Micah has this verse about love, love, justice, mercy, justice,
Well,
love. What is
yeah,
this?
again, like I'm not sure. Like again, he specifically points out abandon idolatry,
Mhm.
and though the verse we're going to see, the verse we just read, has just like our earlier verse from Isaiah, some information like right before it and right after that I think are meant to be taken into consideration when we're reading the New Testament. So, for example, if you look at the actual words that we're citing, it
Mhm.
looks like when you like, let's just maybe check out Micah right here, Micah 5:1 through 5:3
Yeah,
or so.
Micah 5:1-2. This is Micah 5:2. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just read it really quickly in English, and
Mhm.
it points out some things. And you, O Bethlehem of Ephrat, which we'll discuss, at least among the clans of Judah, which is a way to look at it, or young, it depends. From you one shall come forth to rule Israel for me. So this is where we see a messianic figure who's supposed to rule. One whose origin is from old, from ancient times, which probably means from the Davidic line. But you see, like we see at least a formal definition of a kingship or messianicship there. Number two, truly he will leave them helpless until she who is to bear has born. The rest of his countrymen shall return to the children of Israel. He shall stand and shepherd by the might of the Lord, by the power of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall dwell secure. See, number two, there'll be peace and security. For though he shall wax great to the ends of the earth, meaning that unless you want to say that's symbolic of a large piece of land, it seems to be that it's supposed to be universal, of course, the whole world. And they'll just finish this verse for the hell of it. And that shall afford safety should Assyria invade our land and tread upon our fortress. We will set it over 7 shepherds, 8 princes of men. Okay. So what we see is over here a very clear kind of vision of
Mhm.
kingship. But why does the New Testament cite this? So the very simple, like all the commentators already point out, it's very simple why it's citing, because it says, arguably, that this prophet that we see in 2:5, that you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not among the princes of Israel, that this person, what they will call the governor in this translation, and I don't know what word you have for the translation for you, that the Hebrew is ruler, by the way. But
Mhm.
Moshel means a ruler more than a governor. A governor, I feel, has like a lot of American connotations. A
Mhm.
ruler just means a lot of times another word for king.
Mhm.
So, but just to be clear, it does not say king; it says ruler. Someone who's powerful. That person will be born. So, if I was going to be a literalist, if I was just going to read this and say what I thought it means that the king is supposed to come from the tribe of Judah,
Mhm.
and but they interpret that Bethlehem Ephrata, namely that piece of land, is going to be the place that the king is born. So it's an interesting read. This whole prophecy is definitely, meant to be. A lot of it is symbolism,
Mhm.
but nonetheless, they thought, the writers of Matthew, that this would kind of bring an extra proof to prove and again, I think this one's also cited in Mark. I didn't look it up, but so whoever wrote this one, they thought that this verse from Micah would be an extra proof text.
So according to this, Jesus checks the first mark. He's of the line of Judah through Joseph, and so that's being checked. So because when you say in the land of Judah, meaning from the descendants of Judah, that's being checked.
I
That's
mean,
checked.
the Hebrew is tough. Like I'll give you a literal translation of the Hebrew, and you can do what you want with it. And you, Beit Lechem, the city of Beit Lechem, in the land of Ephrat, which is like the general mountainous area, probably. Tza'ir liyot ba'alfa Yehuda. Young you will be amongst the either myriads or leaders of Yehuda. And Li Yetzeh Liyot Moshe, and from me you will go out a leader, a ruler in Israel. From me. So again, it sounds like this is a messianic verse. It
Mhm.
wasn't meant to be that coming literally from the land of Beit Lechem. I think that's definitely how this first century reader read it, and there's no inherent problem with that. So the fact that Jesus was born of Beit Lechem would be a proof text from this one verse.
So is it proof or is it evidence?
I'm not sure what the difference is. What's the difference in your head between?
So when I mean proof, right? I mean, I'm again at this time just putting for the question. So he's already mentioned that Jesus is the Christ, the King, and now he's providing evidence for that. Like he's made his claim, or he has stated his claim that he's a Christ. I mean, again, it's not direct, but it's subtle, right? In chapter 1, he says Jesus the Christ was born, and so he has put forth a statement, a claim, and now he starts providing evidence for that to say this proof. I think more towards where he didn't leave. Well, I got to think about it. Maybe it's the same thing. I don't
I
know.
mean, I don't know the answer, but I would say that we spoke about prophecy fulfillments earlier. And I think you have to view prophecy fulfillments from a first century Jewish perspective, that some people had a checklist. And it could be that you don't need 100% of all the checks, because otherwise we're not going to get our subversive Messiah through the front door. But it could be the more checks that you get, the better a proof it is for the Bible wielding Jewish first century people.
Okay, so according to this, we have 3 check marks that he'll be born in Bethlehem of Judah. Is that
So I don't know why it says of Judah. The Hebrew is of Ephrat.
Okay.
And Ephrat is the land in Judah.
Mhm,
But it's a subtle change,
mhm.
especially considering that they said in Bethlehem of Judea. Again, I think that's proper, because Bethlehem is in Judea, and it says Bethlehem, the land of Ephrat. I don't have any problems with that.
Okay, so that's one condition. What's the others? Like I'm missing the other
Well,
ones.
I mean, I'm not someone who memorized the Testament, but the earlier one will be that there will be a baby born, and they'll name him Emmanuel.
Oh yeah. That's an
And now
Isaiah.
we are, and again,
That's an
I think,
Isaiah.
as I mentioned, I'm sure we could Google how many new Old Testament Bible references there are, but I told you there's 11 that are specifically Matthean, as a not appearing in
Well,
Mark.
let me phrase my question this way. So you said, right, in the first century, Jews, they will look for certain check marks, like Jesus, if he was
I mean,
Messiah.
I'm guessing as much,
Yeah.
because it's really hard to
So
understand what's taking
yeah,
place otherwise.
yeah. So my question is, do we have a list of those things they were looking for? So he quoted this verse. It's
So we spoke about this last time. I think that different communities will have different lists, and
I
especially
see.
if you're buying into this subversive, like the Zoroastrians also have a messianic figure, which is very interesting. Like if we want to then go into Zoroastrian Magi's, what they mean when they say the king of the Jews, maybe that could be their king too. And let's be honest, the Matrix has their messianic figure. And lots of people have their messianic figures. So it's unclear what a checklist will be. And I think it comes down to your community. We had a really interesting thing even in the world today, where there's a sect of Jews who seemed really wanted to claim that they had a messianic figure, and they had their own checklist. So it's always like a little self-describing when we talk about who these people are.
Interesting, yeah. But well, so this sets us on the mark where Jesus he provides evidence, he provides proof that Jesus is a fulfillment of these of these
That
Old
he was
Testament.
born in Beit Lechem should be a proof text for the Matthean community. That's like the
So
general.
help me understand this. So what is the importance of Bethlehem? I mean, so I understand this
I
prophecy.
don't have a good answer. It's a suburb of, it's south of Jerusalem. Beit Lechem is a historically important city in that it's close to Jerusalem. It's one of the old cities of antiquity. And again, if you Wikipedia, you can see like how it's.
So help me understand this. So within Judaism, is there something called Holy Land, as in because the
Yeah.
prophecy is there that this piece of land defined by this boundary is much more
So again,
holier
I
than.
think they differentiate between, because of, you have to differentiate between the person who wrote this, I don't think he was trying to say that when Micah wrote this in the 7th century, 7 whatever 100 BCE. I don't think he was trying to say Beit Lechem is this important city. He's just saying like this is kind of like how we view Ephrat. Like for example, one of the matriarchs died on the road of Ephrat, namely Rachel, and she's buried today. Her tomb is in Beit Lechem in Bethlehem or close. So, it's just one of these things that I think to those who are impressed by it would be impressed by it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So,
I think if Jesus wasn't born, he's born in Jerusalem, I think we'd be like, okay, that's in Judea, that's fine. I think, listen, it's not only, again, from my perspective, it's not only Bethlehem, it's, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judea, where it changes the quote from Ephrat to Judea, which I think, and then it points out that there's some guy who's going to come from it who's going to be a ruler. So I think all those things are, and also, like, let's be honest, we also have the shepherd reference also, which I think shows up in Revelation.
So what does it mean to be a shepherd? Like, ruler, yeah, king, we get that, but also shepherd my people Israel. So who are these people? When you say my people Israel, is it a tribe, or is it all the tribes, or is it beyond that? And then by this time we have is the country split in two, right? The one in the northern part, the one in the southern part. So is it referring to?
So yes, at that point, they would have differentiated between Judea and Israel. Israel would have been the northern part, and Judea would have been the southern part.
Okay.
So yes, this would have been a point. So when you read this, again, we're going to get another quotation about this area also when we get to 2:18. We'll talk about Rachel and how she's viewed from this area. So there's a lot of references.
So here's my question. So what's meant by a shepherd, and my people Israel, right? So it sounds like it's referring to the kingdom of Israel, and not so, which means it doesn't include Judah.
No. So yeah, you're making a good point, but I think that even once the people of Israel broke up to the northern kingdom, still there would have been people who I would have identified as B'nai, the sons of Israel. It's an unclear from a historical perspective how people identified. The fact that it says Judah and Israel, I think has to do with its universalistic message. That in the end of the day, Israel and Judah will recombine to like its Solomonic monarchy of having both in one country. So I think it's just meant to be, there's a thing called biblical parallelisms. I think that the first two lines are supposed to parallel the second two lines. Does that make sense? So the first one, it says, there's going to be there's something good is going to come from Israel. And the second one says something good a leader is going to come from Israel. So both of them kind of say the same thing in different ways. And that's really how the Bible's written throughout. If you read Psalms and other books, this idea of overlapping ideas with small differences. So I view Judah and Israel as synonyms here.
Yeah, but then isn't the concept of ruler and shepherd, they're opposite, right? You cannot be a ruler and a shepherd unless we mean shepherd to be something else, or a ruler to be something else.
Is a person who leads sheep, right? And make sure that they stay in their areas, make sure they're fed, make sure they don't get kidnapped. Isn't that exactly what a king does?
But a king also fights battles. A king also does justice. A king does, as you said, right?
A shepherd could fight battles against.
So I think this goes back to the conversation yesterday. You said, shouldn't a king be regal and monarchical, have all this?
Well, I'm just saying that
shepherd is governed by
shepherd is a perfect symbol for a ruler. And again, like shepherd has many connotations. You could definitely argue the gentle side of a shepherd. He's a person who could contemplate in the corner of a field. But don't forget also when Jacob in Genesis describes his life as a shepherd, he describes it as very, very difficult. And again, you have to protect the sheep. You have to make sure they're fed, make sure that they are breeding. It's very much has a lot of parallels to being a prince and or a ruler. And I think that's definitely how it's meant to be understood in 2:6. But again, it's not lost on the Christian community that a shepherd has multiple interpretations and meanings. And the fact that Jesus is called a shepherd, I don't think from my perspective, that when he's called a shepherd, it's viewed from this monarchical perspective. It's viewed from the humble perspective.
Well, Christians can Christians read all kinds of things. We can make Jesus into, or we've made Jesus into anything and everything. I mean, but so anyway, so but I'm intrigued, right? So a person can be these two forms, and so here we see that Jesus he fulfills the prophecy, at least according to the author. He will fulfill this prophecy of being of he was born in Bethlehem in the land of Judah, and that he will be a king. And we've already used the word king, and so he uses this to be the prophecy to say that he'll be a king. And I'm intrigued by use the word shepherd, as he also state by what kind of king, because Herod, as you mentioned, was ruthless, was paranoid, was ruthless, was not humble, was not gentle, and the Romans too. The
Right.
Romans were.
I agree with everything you're saying.
Amen. That's good.
And
Amen.
I agree. And there's nothing wrong with when you see a biblical parallelism
Yeah.
to saying that, well, a Moshel, a king is this, and a Roeh, a shepherd is this. And it's two different kinds of ideas that are meant to be put forth. But we just have to always realize and remember that they're still meant to be somewhat synonyms.
Amen. Yeah. I can't agree more. Amen. Yeah. Okay. So this probably sets us up with the subversive nature of the text, where someone is both king and shepherd at the same time. And Jesus is both God and man, both shepherd and king, Judah and Israel, Judah
I
and
would say
Israel.
that from a first century read, there's nothing wrong with that. From a 7th century BCE read, it'd be more difficult to differentiate the shepherd versus the king. But I think, again, if we're going to take the text literally, we should note that it says ruler and shepherd, and to think of all the connotations of shepherd seems appropriate.
Amen.
Isaac, look at us, done so early in the morning.
Yeah, we only did 2 verses today, and I think we're
That's
really
double what we usually do.
we double what we usually do. That's right. So tomorrow is at 7 till, I don't know, 7 till the rest of it, or
Yeah, we'll see. Again, who knows? That was good to pop it out, and so hopefully I won't ask you for too many reports today.
as long as we discuss Matthew, I have time for everything else as well, Rabbi. So I need to